I think people forget that the art industry is like all other industries where it is a business at the end of the day. And so if you are, a good client, meaning like you don't flip works, you pay on time, you bring other people who also do the same, then I think that trust is built very quickly through that. The narrative around buying what you love is so prevalent and just like you need to do the work and, like go to the galleries, go to the, blah, 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 like train your eye. Like I hear this so much on social media, but you have to realize in reality, people have a life. I do get messages sometimes via my social media accounts and they're like, I want to invest in art and I have this much. Like, what should I buy? And those conversations, I mean, those people do exist and do reach out, but those conversations don't ever go anywhere because I do think it is something that you do have to have a connection with. If you're in a position to support in a meaningful way, then maybe you should think about it.
Hello and welcome back to the Collector's Corner with me, Antonia Piersanti. As I continue my exploration of art advisory, I spoke with Prisca Pan, the founder of Unframd. Prisca is based in the US and works with clients from tech, law, banking, and other non-art backgrounds. She caught my attention because she puts strategy and finance explicitly at the center of her advisory practice. Prisca's mission is to get more people to collect art while also understanding it as an asset class, which she likes to compare to venture capital. So it's a nuanced topic that Prisca and I explore. Ultimately, I do agree with her about the importance of bringing more diverse voices and points of view to the art world. It's not about throwing away the old, but the world is changing so fast, and we need new ways of doing things if we want an open, thriving art world. But I'll stop here and I'll let you enjoy my conversation with Prisca Pan. Prisca, welcome to the podcast. Very happy to have you.
Very excited to be here, Antonia. Thanks so much for having me.
I came across you because I saw that you very openly put collecting strategically and with financial intention at the heart of your practice, which is something I
Mhm.
hadn't really seen up until then. So I think that's really interesting because I feel like it puts you also at odds with, some conventional, maybe traditional art world thinking.
Mhm.
And I'd love to just explore how you got to that point and if you feel that tension as well. But
Yeah.
before we get there, maybe you can introduce yourself a little bit more in detail in your own words and what you do.
Well, I'm Prisca. I'm the founder of Unframd. Our mission really is to empower more people to own art and to democratize this as an asset class. We really want to empower people to own art as a way to create their own narratives of history. I personally believe that it is really important that great art doesn't just live in museums and in public spaces. The way to really move art forward is actually having it in our living spaces where it elevates everyday conversations in living rooms and in dining rooms. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing.
So, what type of clients do you typically work with?
Because my background is in tech, I have a lot of clients from that
You're
aspect.
also based in San Francisco, right?
Yes, but I actually have an equal number of clients in SF and in New York. Though the background is still the same tech or it's working professionals. So lawyers, doctors, bankers, etc. So anybody who has disposable income and means and want to invest, have pieces up in their space that means something culturally and also I guess like the potential upside really is a lagging indicator of the cultural piece.
Interesting. Yeah, what point of their collector journey are your clients at?
I have people who, maybe have thought about this for a while, but just don't know where to get started. Or maybe they have kind of dabbled in it before and want to be a little bit more serious. Maybe they've gotten a couple of prints and smaller pieces, and then now they are, really starting to think about this seriously. I also have another segment that is, maybe collectors who have been collecting in a particular way, like, they're blue chip collectors but they actually have now more interest in emerging artists. I help there too.
You talked about transitioning from tech. So tell me about
Yeah.
that transition. How did it happen? And I'd love to hear also what sort of lens or advantage you feel coming from a tech background gives you in the art world.
My background's in tech. I'm in tech for the last 10 years, primarily doing product design for various companies. The way that I got into this was actually I've always been a fan of art and been in and out of museums and did some drawing classes and also d- was art history classes as well in high school and college, but just never kind of pursued it professionally. And I just thought that good art, investment grade art was like Picasso, or Monet or Goya, like just the names of really familiar names that museums have. And I was like, oh, that is out of reach for me. I mean, I'm never going to be able to buy good art until I got my own place. And I was like, okay, maybe it's time for me to do that. And I started looking at it from a collector's lens and just kind of surveying the entire landscape of, okay, where is it possible to get art and what kind of art is it? And so by doing that, I realized lifestyle brands like Restoration Hardware, they were selling decor anywhere from 3 to 10K that had no resale value. And then so when I turned to fine art, I was very quickly overwhelmed with the number of options available to me. I started reading some books and then I also reached out to Barbara Guggenheim and because I read her book and she's an art advisor and so I actually kind of bought my first piece through her. And so that gave me the lens of like, how do I approach this? Looking at blue chip artist auction results, and then also realizing that the highest percentage ROI is actually for works that are below 250K. And where do you find those art fairs? And then walking the art fairs, I realized newspaper outlets only covers the headline sales, which makes sense, but there's a lot of nuance that's lost that you can't find anywhere else. Information like, wow, this artist actually sold out their booth first at Frieze London, and then the same gallery brought them again to Art Basel Paris and still sold out. And so that kind of data point that comes into play when you're evaluating a piece of work, it just isn't available.
It sounds like you, right from the get go, you were looking for data points, for metrics, for ways to evaluate what you're looking at. Is that something you feel like might be related to coming from tech, this approach?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's mainly because, the information that I'm looking for just doesn't exist, right? So, which
Yeah.
is why I had to do my own research and what I felt was comparable to looking at startups. So I have done some angel investing and then also been an employee of startups. And so even as that, I would consider myself, I would apply the same lens. It's like, okay, why would I want to work at this company? Why is it worth spending my time or giving money at this stage? And so the similarities were, just in terms of how do you evaluate for a company, it's like, okay, in the very beginning stages is all about who is starting the company. And that is very similar to an artist, right? Trying to build a brand for themselves. They're essentially trying to start a company.
So how was the learning curve then? Going to all these fairs, getting up to speed with all the data that you could, I guess, mainly secondary market data anyway, auction results. How has that journey been, that learning journey, learning curve?
I just remember feeling really overwhelmed at my
Yeah.
first fair.
When was your
Was that?
first fair?
This was maybe
20.
2021, 22. I had like a regular ticket, but I went back all 4 days. I just wanted to walk the fair and I wanted to familiarize myself with what I'm looking at and how do I even look at things. I think having other people, so kind of other collectors for there and kind of talking about how they feel about the artwork was also really informative. It's like people's reaction to the art that they're seeing. That was also super valuable.
What were you looking for at that point in those reactions?
I remember there was this artist that I it just happened to be by her booth. Her name is Alexa Hanataka. I was at the Armory Fair, and towards the last day, it was just like the people who had just made their way over. The booth was not even in a convenient location. It was kind of like in the back. You kind of had to walk a bit to get there, but there were so many people that just came to like specifically to look at her pieces, which I thought it was incredible. The way that she carved out, the patterns that are on this like Japanese milled paper. And it's like the color, just all these aspects that they were talking about really showed me how her audience appreciated her work. And the depth of their appreciation was also very evident. So, anyways, I ended up buying one of her pieces.
You liked it before you saw all this, and it sort of made you feel like did it reinforce how you felt, or it validated, I guess, how you felt about it?
I think having a conversation about it, like, so being able to articulate, like, I was drawn to it. Does the work stay with me? So,
Yeah.
like, I saw it on the first day of the fair, I'm like, I was really impressed. And I mean, there were several pieces that I saw that I was very impressed by. So I'm just like, but does it continue to stay with you? It did. And then it's just like seeing other people, talking to other people and also trying to make sense of how I was feeling towards her piece, right? That was really helpful. And then I was like, you know what? If am still thinking about it 3 days, 4 days later, then probably is a good piece for me to get.
So you bought it at the fair?
Yes,
Yeah.
last day.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was that your one of your first pieces?
No, it was not. That one was my last piece.
Tell me about
Yeah,
the
yeah.
first piece you bought.
The first piece I bought was actually a print. It was sort of like a situation when I wanted to dip my toes in and, I was feeling really scared because I was still kind of trying to understand how I was feeling about collecting the data I was getting. I like just wasn't quite sure. But anyways, I made it. I did it anyways. It's this black and white photography print
Okay.
and edition. And it was of the square in Barcelona. So it was a project that he did on Gaudi, and Gaudi is actually one of my favorite artists. And I just don't know what it was, but it was this black and white photo, and it just kind of really spoke to me. It was like I couldn't stop looking at it. Yeah, there was something maybe graphic about it too, which kind of speaks to my design background, which I appreciated. And so, yeah, that was my first piece.
I also wanted to ask you, coming from a different background, coming from tech, I feel like the art world is so reliant on relationship and very much built on trust. So,
Mm.
at what point did you feel like you had gained maybe sufficient knowledge, sufficient expertise of and trust from the art world to start advising others?
I think people forget that the art industry is like all other industries where it is a business at the end of the day. And so if you are, a good client, meaning like you don't flip works, you pay on time, you bring other people who also do the same, then I think that trust is built very quickly through that. And also because I think the market nowadays is a little softer than
Mhm.
what it was before, which makes it easier for new people like myself to kind of step into the industry. And I do think, I mean, obviously, they will always be snobs, but for the most part, I do feel pretty welcomed by most.
It's reassuring.
I tend to not like to work with people who are a little bit more stuck up. So if I don't feel welcomed, if they're sort of gatekeeping and
Yeah.
you know, if they say something like, we have many collectors that we're working with, and we're not sure if we can like squeeze you in or if they're slow. Those are the things that I kind of take note of. And it's like obviously how they present the artists too. There's a lot of pieces in the news that talk about like how the galleries don't pay artists and so I do take note of those as well, like just
Yeah.
as a flag to like not buy from them.
It's actually like a nice segue into a question I had about the framework that you use to evaluate a work, evaluate an artist, and and how you use that with your client. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
My clients are people who always, I would say, like who always buy what they love. And also obviously like the cultural impact that, like a piece has for them that needs to resonate. What's your goal with their collection? Like, are there any sort of themes that they're gravitating towards? Like some people really love abstract expressionism. They don't like figuration. Other people are like really into figuration. Other people, it's more like agnostic theme wise, but they are more partial to causes. So whether it's like supporting emerging female artists or works with social justice as a theme, or, so trying to figure out what it is that they kind of gravitate towards, and then also like their risk level, and then making sure that they understand what they're buying into is so important. So, and then comparing, I guess, like comparing two works. So it's like, okay, you can buy an emerging artist canvas, let's say 24 by 16 for 10K. Okay. Or you can buy this maybe mid-career artist prints, editioned and signed for maybe 15. And it's like, okay, well, which one should I get? And I think doing that analysis of, okay, well, this emerging artist has XYZ. Like on his resume, this is how he's selling versus a mid career artist. What does that mean? Like this specific person, this specific medium, this edition size, and also like the theme, right, of the work. So, and I think all of these is really important to understand before you make a decision.
And would you say your clients, they know what they want most of the time, or do they think they do and then they realize maybe they don't? Like what does that look like?
If they're, newer, they can't really like explain very well what they're looking for. But once and I think it's just like a growing process with them because, I do have some pretty like diverse collectors who are like buying pieces across. As I'm kinda growing with them, it's also like a discovery process that I'm, like, doing with them too. And then that's also a good time to check in, be like, "Hey, I'm observing this. Do you feel like it's true? And is this sort of how we wanna continue kinda collecting or, is there" sometimes I would give my 2 cents.
Are most of them familiar already with art, as in it's a passion that they've had for a while, or is this a completely new thing that they want to explore? Maybe they have some disposable income and they're thinking about buying art, but they know nothing about it yet, or they weren't interested in it up until now.
So most of them do have some interest in art, so whether it's art, actual fine art, or like art adjacent, so, just really into a ballet or opera. I would say these are all culturally aware people. They may have gotten a few small pieces like prints or, whatever, and then they wanna be a little more serious, or they maybe have bought one or two paintings, and they're like, okay, yeah, we can really identify with the pain that you're talking about like it being opaque and then not really understanding what is it that we're actually paying for.
That's really interesting because you mentioned, they don't come to you saying, "Okay, I wanna buy some art because I want to make money," 'cause,
Yeah.
obviously, that would be not the best place to do that and not the best way to do that.
Everybody who said that to me don't actually end up going through with it.
What do you
So
mean?
everybody, like, sometimes I have, so meaning I do get messages sometimes in my via my social media accounts, and they're like, "I wanna invest in art and I have this much, like, what should I buy?" And those conversations, I mean, those people do exist and do reach out, but those conversations don't ever go anywhere because I do think it is something that you do have to have a connection with,
Yeah.
you know? It's not a stock where you're, like, you know, checking out your dashboard and seeing where the price ticker is, every day. Doesn't work like that. I mean, it's sort of an asset that you need to enjoy, right? Because you're looking at it every day. And if there's no it's almost like a collectible. It's like people who are interested in watches are gonna buy watches. People who are interested in luxury handbags, they're gonna, invest in that category. It's not going to be yeah, there's always going to be passion, I think, emotions involved in this purchase.
I fully agree. It's not like a stock in that sense. I would even say that you need to be prepared to lose everything a lot more than if you were buying, yeah, a stock or a property even, or, I don't know, bonds. It's a lot more likely that you might not make a return on this than with other asset classes.
I guess to be continued. I do think there is it's obviously not as liquid, but I do think it's better than your high yield savings account with the 4% year over year. But yeah, I think as with any investments, there's always risk, right? Like if you read any sort of investment fine print, they will never ever promise 100%. At the same time, I think it is about doing that due diligence and just doing your homework about, about the artist.
I think you can do that to some extent for sure. But like you said, there's very little data available. The data is available is imperfect. If you're buying on the primary market, which is what you're doing, I guess I
Yeah.
personally, because I work in private markets, it's a bit of a pet peeve of mine when it's
Mhm.
advertised when art is being marketed basically or advertised as an asset class to a very broad audience, that might not
Mhm.
be sufficiently educated about investing. They might not have the sort of financial foundation that is already in place with stocks, bonds, maybe, real estate, maybe even some private equity. So I feel like you need to be quite a
Yeah.
sophisticated investor already if you're going to be able to understand art as an asset class, as an alternative asset class. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned this a little bit before. So it's a little bit like venture capital, right? Like when you're investing very, very early stage in companies, there's not a lot of data. So what are you looking at? You're looking at the founders, right? Does this person has any kind of outlying characteristic? What are their superpowers? Is it like super persistence? Like, has this person, tried something really hard out of their comfort zone and still made it, data points, even though they're softer, I would say qualitative, but they're really important in the very early stages because that's how you know whether or not you should back this person, you know? And I think same thing with an artist because ultimately it is not easy being like an artist who has this kind of trajectory, let's say towards blue chip, right? Like you need a certain kind of persistence, consistency. You got to show up, and do the work. Like it's hard work, not just by how talented you are, but it just depends on how hard you wanna play and at what level you wanna play. I
Yeah.
mean, another analogy I would use is like, I love tennis, and so it's like for tennis players, when they get to, Wimbledon level, everybody, like everybody who is, in the quarterfinals or even before, it's a great athlete. Every single one of them is great. But what separate like great athletes from being the champion or like the two top runner ups is actually mindset. It's perseverance, like, how do you bounce back from failure? Like, do you dwell on it? Do you move on? Like, all of those things matter, right? So it's not even just about, like, the pure talent anymore. It's just about, all these other qualities that you really need to persist and persevere and actually do something,
Yeah.
meaningful. And those things, thankfully, you can kind of gauge very early on. Show the kind of showings that they're doing, the kind of attention that they're getting, and, do they kind of consistently show up? Who is backing them? Any in the industry, it's like, artists know great artists, right? Like, so great artists know great artists. And people are willing to help each other out. So it's like, okay, are there any, who's like more established artists kind of looking at this younger artist, taking them under their wings and like helping them out with things and maybe doing a group show with them or like putting them in a show that they themselves are curating. I think all of those things speak volume.
100%. It's the person, but then, lots of external factors as well. And I agree with your analogy with the venture capital analogy. I think it's a good one, but it is a power law, right? You're very likely to lose your money in VC, and if you invest, same as angel investing, which you're obviously familiar with. So what
Yeah.
does make the difference is because the data is hard to get, it's really about access, right? And
Yeah.
it's a long game to
Yeah.
earn access to the best deals in venture, and I would say similarly to the best information and to the best, quote unquote, best artists in arts. So I wonder if the
Yeah.
financial argument should be secondary in that sense. Don't expect really a financial return on the art that you buy unless you have access or you're prepared to play the long game, do the work to earn access. Would you agree with that?
Uh, I mean, so just as a sidebar, like I've worked at 5 startups and
Mm.
3 of them has had meaningful exits. One of them is on its way, and then the last one didn't do well. So, like, I would say my success rate is about, what is that, 75%? I mean, yes, of course. I think if zoom out and just say, yeah, venture as a whole, people are like, oh, yeah, it's just like you need 1 or 2 superstars to, you know, get you, get you, get you there. And I just, anyways, I do believe that there is, it's just like, okay, so maybe like another analogy that I could use is real estate, which is somewhat familiar. And, it's almost like I would argue everybody buys a home that they're in love with, but obviously there is the financial aspect, and you should go in and do your homework. You should look at comps. You should look at how this neighborhood is doing, like what's the walking score? How are the school districts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And if at the end of the day, you're still like, you know what? Maybe there are stronger homes that I could buy on the market, but I'm really in love with this home. And I know what I'm getting myself into, and I'm going to do it, you know? May not be the highest return, but I know I'm not going to lose money, and it fits the best for my family's needs. And I would say that is sort of the layer that people are lacking, when it comes to buying art, because the narrative around buying what you love is so prevalent and just like, you need to do the work and, like go to the galleries, go to the, blah, 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 like train your eye. Like I hear this so much on social media, but you have to realize in reality, people have a life outside. Like people need to go to work. People need to feed their kids. People need to, take care of their parents. People need to, there's so many responsibilities that at the end of the day. Do people want great art? Yes, but, like, if you're telling me that, like, I have to go to all these shows and it, like, takes up so much of my time, like, that's just going to be
It's a
a
full-time job.
blocker for me,
Yeah.
right? Versus just yeah. It just be like, "Just tell me what is good." Like, "What are you seeing?" You go to all these things and, like, I want this kinda art, and I think that's where most people are at. It's not like, "Oh, I have time to go to a gallery opening at, like, 7 p.m., on a Thursday night when I have, a toddler and a five-year-old that needs my attention."
Tell me
Like,
about
that's
it.
just not gonna you know what I mean? Like, let's just be real. Let's just be real, okay? And it's like, yeah, would I love to do that? Yeah, of course I would. But it's just people have responsibilities and the obligations. And yeah, again, I believe we shouldn't make it so hard, right, for them to have access to these things,
Yeah.
and really meeting people where they're at.
I spoke to an advisor and her client in the one of the previous episodes, and he was saying exactly that. He said, I love looking at art, but I hired my advisor, who's also my friend, because she does this all day, every day. So she sees so much more than me. And then we can talk about
Yeah,
it. And if she knows me so well by now, if she sees anything that she thinks I like, I'll go with her. But
yeah,
it's just like a force multiplier to have her all day, every day
yeah,
looking at things. So yeah, I hear you. And the
yes.
toddler and 5-year-old, it's, like, definitely something I can personally relate to. Makes, going to I mean, I was, it's gallery weekend here in Berlin, and so, I was hoping
Uh-huh.
to
Mhm.
check out a few new shows opening, and obviously I had to take my 5-year-old with me, and instead of going to, I don't know, 8 galleries, I went to 3, So it's, of course,
Yeah, right.
there's other stuff going on in people's lives for sure. The analogy you made with real estate, I think that's a good one because there is also that, especially if you're buying for to live in, there really is that element of the emotion, the emotional aspect also plays into it.
Yeah,
You like see yourself living there and you're there, there for like a longer period of time. And similarly, it's also not very liquid, right? Like you're not buying it thinking I'm going
yeah,
to resell this. So I think that is actually like a
yeah.
a good a good analogy.
The thing that people don't realize is art is kinda like real estate, right? I mean, it's a passion buy, and I recently have someone said, "Oh, I'll never sell what I buy." But the thing is you don't know. It's like maybe you'll outgrow it. Maybe your style change. Maybe, the 3 Ds in real estate applies to art too: death, divorce, debt. You just don't know. And then when it's time for you to, exit, you want a good way to exit because nothing is more painful than, like, buying something nobody wants.
When you talk to your clients, does it happen that they come back to you when they wanna sell, or have you not had many clients sell that you'd also bought for yet?
So I do help my clients sell as well. Uh, and I have well, yeah, and then I have done a few where it's, they came to me because they needed to sell something and I was kind of doing them a favor. So, but I would say the core of my business is helping people buy, and then through what they have bought from me, I will help them sell. Most recently, I actually helped somebody sell something maybe for again, it's like you have to find the right person, right? Like it actually went for like 2 times more than what it should have sold for. And that's because this other person is just such a big fan of the piece. And even though we were both aware that the market for this artist is not great, but I think there was just such a big resonance, like, with this buyer
How
and
did
with
you find the buyer?
I was just, like, looking for this artist and maybe anything that's associated with this artist, ch and so this person was, like, posting about this artist, and I was like, "Oh, okay, well, let me just reach out and see if there's any interest." Yeah, I noticed this person bought art and then, like, posts a lot about this artist, so I was like, "Okay, well, we'll give it a shot." And so anyways, yeah. So that was how that happened.
Can you explain how what your business model is in both,
Yes.
both in on the purchasing side and selling side, and is it different?
I think like others, I take a percentage of the commission, but there's also a subscription fee. So the subscription helps support the search and the maintenance of, just the valuation and the artist's careers update and market updates. So that's kind of all part of what I do. And obviously there's like the negotiation part and the shipping, which is actually gnarlier than most people know.
I keep hearing
Um,
that. Yeah.
yeah, and that's part of it, and then but really it's about the updates for the artist market. So if you bought someone, I will give you like a quarterly or a biannual update depending on, how active the artist practices. So you get that report. For every piece that you purchase through me, you also get an investment one-pager write-up. It's including, yeah, like why this artist, why this series, why this work, market data, and then career trajectory. So I also help you sell, but there's also a backside um, commission because then my incentive is aligned. Anytime I say this artist is a good buy, that's also a stake on my reputation.
Has it ever happened that your strategic assessment or the financial assessment of a piece or an artist's trajectory diverged from your gut feeling?
This is the thing that gets me the most is people are always like, "Oh yeah, art is so subjective." Right? Like how do you know something is good and not? It's like an eye of the beholder and et cetera. And I feel like yeah, this is where I think like the market demand side becomes very, very apparent of whether or not people resonate with these pieces. That's hard to deny. I mean, you can say it's subjective, whatever, but if this artist is consistently like selling 80% at fairs or like selling out, there's something there at like different fairs. So like, whether it's the different editions of friezes or different editions of art basels, but there is a consistent demand for that artist at across geography. There is something there. If this artist is in institutions in 5 out of the 7 continents that we have, there is something real there. There are 2 ways to look at it, right? It's like, okay, 1 is like, do you personally resonate? And then 2 is like, I think looking at these signs is also really telling. So I do think there is a way to, I guess, like quantify or at least do your due diligence enough that you can tell if something is worth backing or
Yeah.
not.
It's
Yeah.
almost separate questions from whether you personally like the arts, which again is a separate
Yeah.
question from is it any good?
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So it's like, okay, 1, do you personally resonate? And 2, it's like, okay, well, when it does, like what kind of, then we kind of look at the trajectory of what you're buying into.
Just switching gears a little bit here. I saw that you talk quite a lot about the importance of participating in the market as a collector. So I
Yeah.
want to ask you what you mean by that exactly, and what does that look like in practice with your clients when you tell them that? What are you encouraging them to do and practically?
My angle to this is I just believe more people should be collecting art, period. Going back to, my mission is like what ordinary people only extraordinary art. Like it shouldn't be that hard. And I do think that whether or not people realize what they're doing, I mean, maybe the very basic need is just like, I have an empty home and I need great art. That's good enough. But I think it's the giving back of a piece. I think once they own something, the joy of owning it, the proudness of, like, owning a piece like that and the way that they're talking about it to their friends, like, "Hey, I got this great new piece. Come check it out. Like, this is what this artist stands for." Having more conversations like that, but it doesn't have to be, at a museum or like in an art gallery. Just be in your homes, right? And we basically like activated them as like participators of culture and, buying what they stand for. I have a client who bought a piece recently by Mufa Takadiwa. He is this young Zimbabwean artist who used recycled materials to create these like sculpture-like pieces that has some kind of societal consequence. I mean, not just on the climate side, but I think even for him personally. But he just like can't stop talking about it. Like, I would take him to other gallery showings or things like that, and he'd be, like, telling the gallerist about it, or he'd be, like, talking to someone else and showing them, like, a picture of a piece that he got. I mean, this is how the word spreads, like, even more so than you going to museum. Because, like I said, earlier with people having lives, like, where do you spend most of your time? Like, if it's not in your own living rooms, it's in the living rooms of your friends. It's you know, and people are gonna talk to you about what they're passionate about, and there's no better way to do this, in my opinion. That's, like, what cultural participation means.
It's like a virtuous cycle, right? It's a way to
Yeah.
bring even more people in a very organic way.
One of my other clients that I helped kind of buy
Yes.
Atunji Jones' work, and they threw a dinner party for the work. Like, they, like, gathered their friends and, like, brought them together and, like, wanted to tell them about this great artist and, like, this new piece to their home, addition to their home, and they were just so excited, and then they're, like, texting me, like, months after the purchase, like, still kinda like, "Oh my gosh, I saw this in a different light today, like, I didn't, know that this thing was there." Yeah, I think there's no greater joy when I see things like that, and they're, like, so passionate about what they got, and they're so willing to talk to their friends about the artist. I mean, like, it's great, right? Like, I mean, what more do you need?
I agree. I agree.
Yeah,
There's one thing I wanted to ask you about also on the culture side of thing is I saw a piece on your Substack where you talk about how cities that embed cultural decisions in their infrastructure and their infrastructure strategy. So through whether it's building more museums or more places for art in public, maybe I don't know sculpture, just making arts, really embedding it into the public infrastructure of the city, the urban fabric of the city, that those
yeah,
cities over the long term
yeah,
do much better holistically, obviously economically, but also on a holistic level than those that don't have,
yeah.
consider art to that extent. I thought that that was really interesting. And I was wondering how what you think that means for the future generations, considering the cuts that have, affected culture. Obviously, you're in the States, I'm in Europe. I think we can see it across the board. You guys is probably a
Yeah.
little bit worse than what we're seeing here. But what do you think the impact is gonna be? How do you think about them?
I mean, we're definitely in a very interesting time, but I think it's important to remember that this is just a moment in a time, and this too shall pass. I do believe that, like, even though there are funding cuts, right? But there's also some really great things like LACMA, their new building, $750 million. I mean, that's amazing. George Lucas's museum that's coming up too. I mean, it's like a sprawling, considerable acreage or two, maybe, of Los Angeles. I mean, like, that's something to, you know, I think to be proud of. And I think there are investments. It's just, and I think in times of where the funding maybe is less supported. It's just time to be a little bit more creative to find funding because that's definitely available. And I think, people need to step up too. It's like not just with the asking, but also if you're in a position to support in a meaningful way, then maybe you should think about it. Right. And
Yeah.
that's what like this country has made it really easy for people of great means is sort of all the tax benefits that it comes with giving. And I believe that is by design. So people in position to give should really think about it more. And we've made it really easy for them to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like an opportunity almost for private collectors, private art lovers to
Mhm.
take on more of that role, more of that influence almost in a way
Yeah.
also to make sure it's upheld, the value of culture and the value of arts. I have a couple more quick fire, if that's okay.
Yeah.
More about your
Yeah.
own personal collecting. So you talked about the last piece that you purchased, but I was wondering how, when you think about your own collection, how would you describe it
Mm,
in just one word?
it would be outlier.
Ah,
That's how I describe my collection.
and now I kind of want to ask you more. What is it's supposed to be just one word, but I'm curious to hear more now. But
And
you,
that's
you
all
talk,
the time we have for today. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
we'll have to do a separate podcast about
Yeah.
the outlier collection, Prisca's outlier collection. Who's
Uh,
an artist that you're following very closely, but you haven't purchased anything of theirs yet?
there's actually many because I follow many artists for my clients. And, I think for everybody that I recommend, I would buy a piece from, I had the means. So I mentioned Mofat, like he's pretty good. I'm actually a really big fan of his. Tunji, probably. Alvaro Barrington, I'm a huge fan of his.
Very cool. And do you have a collector maybe that you look up to or you think has had a very impressive journey or
Like a
inspiring?
famous
Impressive.
person?
It doesn't have to be. No, it can be someone that you know personally, or maybe you know a lot of famous people.
I would tell you somebody I really respect in the industry, if
Yeah,
that's okay. His collection is great. I mean, yeah, I think everybody knows like Larry Gagosian's story of how he got into art without like any sort of art training or art background. And I think since him, there have been many who have done the same. And I do believe it's needed. I feel like it's very essential, especially in this industry when, most people's backgrounds are art history, which is great. Like there's no denying sort of that specialization. But I also think that at the same time, people from different walks of life will be able to add unique but needed perspective in this industry as it continues to evolve and as it pertains to younger generations. So, again, with like the access piece, with how, people are thinking about collecting overall, like what are people's mindset? Like how do we reach people where they're at? There's definitely a lot of innovation that needs to happen there. And I think those who hold on to the old way of doing things is really going to see a disconnect between, what is the right way of collecting. There's going to be a lot of disconnect there because I think ultimately art needs to be relevant. It needs to be relevant to our time. So, yeah.
that's a fantastic note to finish on. Thank you, Friska.
Thank you, Antonia. This has been so fun.
That's it for today's episode of The Collector's Corner. If you enjoyed it, do follow the show and leave a short rating or review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. It really helps more people find these conversations. And if you've got thoughts, feedback, or someone you think I should talk to next, I'd love to hear from you. Just drop me a message on Instagram or through the website, thecollectorscornerpodcast.com. Thank you for listening and for being part of this growing community. Until next time.